Good morning and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Monday the 7th of March. Today, as you can see, I am at St. Mary's and I am sitting on the chancel step. And I'm sitting here because I wanted to get a new perspective. When I used to be in Mitchell, so when I was first ordained in 1999, I spent almost 5 years as the rector of St. Stephen's in Stratford and Trinity Church in Mitchell. And in Mitchell, that was the smallest of the 2 points. It was a beautiful old church. And I would sit on the steps during the day. And any time of the day, because of the way the church was situated, there was this beautiful stained glass window at the end of the nave, right at the back, right in front of the font, directly in front of the altar down the aisle. And whatever time of the day I was in there, if the sun was shining, it would flow through that window, different angles, and it would be absolutely beautiful. And I used to sit on the top step of the chancel steps. So the steps that were right beside the organ and right beside where my prayer desk was and the pulpit was over there. I would sit there on that step and I would pray and I would think, and sometimes I would have a good cry. I remember after Doreen died, and she was this tiny little woman who had, I think she babysat everybody who lived in Mitchell at some point. And she died, and it just sort of broke my heart. So I remember she used to sit in the same place, and she had on a light brown sort of trench coat style, women's trench coat style that she wore all the time, every Sunday of the year. And she would sit in church. Her husband would drop her off. Jack would drop her off, and she'd come into church, and he'd pick her back up after church. Never come in until the day of her funeral. And we had her funeral on a Sunday. And it was the strangest thing. You know, we don't do funerals during liturgies. And so Jack asked if we would, because that was where her people were, who gathered on Sunday. So we had her funeral on a Sunday during our Eucharist, during our Book of Common Prayer, Holy Communion service. And it was absolutely phenomenal. It was beautiful. The place was packed because all of the kids she'd babysat ever came back with their own families. And Jack sat in her spot. And it was a beautiful day. And so there were lots of times when I would sit on the top step of the chancel in Mitchell, and look out the window toward the big picture of Jesus down there over, like sort of hanging up over the font. And I would think about Doreen, or I'd think about the kids that I baptized in that font. Or I'd think about the fact that the sun always shone in Mitchell. I swear to you, no word of a lie, unless it was a nighttime service, every time I did a service in Mitchell, even if it was raining or like blizzarding out, at some point during the service, the sun would come out. It would shine through that window. And I used to say, the sun always shines on Trinity Mitchell, which was true because the sun, as in soleil, like the sun in the sky, would shine. It really did. But the sun, Jesus Christ, always shone on Trinity Church Mitchell as well. But it wasn't so much about the sun shining. It wasn't so much about this beautiful stained glass window or even Doreen. It was about sitting there in that place where probably 10 priests before me had sat and talked to kids about coffee hours or about children's focuses. And the priest had probably stood there and done weddings and funerals and prepared for baptisms and sung hymns, sometimes well and sometimes poorly. So much had happened in that place. And sitting on the floor gave me perspective. Because sometimes when we stand up in church, we take on this sort of persona. Like when I'm leading worship, I have to have the persona of leading worship. I'm the worship leader. People look to me to know what page we're on or to lead them in prayers and things like that. But sometimes that can you can kind of go to the head that, you know, I'm it. I'm all that. I'm all that in a bag of chips. I'm so important. But there's something about sitting your butt down and taking a look at things from that perspective that brings it all home. When I would sit on the steps at that church, at Trinity Church in Mitchell, and look around, I was still, because of how many steps there were, I was still up sort of above the pew, the top of the pews. But I could see out the side windows. And I could look around and I could imagine, you know, where everybody sat and where they would be. Think about what they were doing with their day. thinking about who they were when they weren't here with me, telling them what page we're on or what hymn we're going to sing. And it reminded me of my relevance to their lives, that I was their Sunday priest. But it called me also then to remember that I was not just their Sunday priest. I was their Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday priest as well. But it wasn't so much about being a priest. It was more about being a Christian. More about recognizing that what I do as a Christian and who I am as a Christian and as a priest has so little to do with Sunday. Yeah, it happens at church and I get filled up and get energy, and hopefully the parishioners do too, and that's where we get sort of fill up our gas tanks of faith to get out there and go back out in the world. But this is like 1 hour or an hour and a half of our lives. That's it. The whole week is filled with 7 days of 24 hours, and I'm not even going to try to do the math in my head about how many that is. And even if you take out 8 hours a day for sleeping and all that stuff, we have a whole heck of a lot of hours left in which we need to grasp a new perspective. We need to sit ourselves down on the floor and look around and see what it really looks like when you're not being all pomp and circumstance, and recognize that who we are as Christians is not just who we are when we're in church. Who we are as Christians is what we're doing when we're outside the church. Because when other people look at us, if they know that we're faithful churchgoers, we are the church. We are the body of Christ for that person. So when I would sit on that step, it reminded me, as I looked at the stained glass window of Jesus, as I looked around and thought about where Doreen would sit, or where, Jean Rainey would sit, or Eve Mabb, or Carolyn, my organist, and all the people that were Vicky Williamson, my lay reader. All those people, when I thought about them, it reminded me that I see them from one perspective when I'm standing up in front of them at church on Sunday. But there's more to them than what I see when I look at them on Sunday. There is all of who they are when they're not in this place. And all of that is who they are when they are out in the world or with their family, sharing the love of Jesus with other people, whether they realize they're doing it or not. And the fact is, every one of them did. And every one of them was good at it. And I hope they realized how good they were at it. I think many of them probably aren't with us anymore. That was 17, 18 years ago. But their memories are still there. Trinity is not an Anglican church anymore, but that doesn't mean that the legacy of that congregation doesn't continue. We are living in a world that's taking on a whole new meaning about what is church. Hey, we're doing church like online. This is funky. This is weird. This is kind of cool and kind of scary. But we are a community. So how do we figure out how to reach each other? How do we share with one another a new perspective? So I invite you to, find a place where you can just sit down on the floor. Now, if you're smart like me here, I'm not saying I'm smart, but I chose a smart thing. I sat down on a step so that I can get back up, because I don't know about you, but my knees getting a little creaky. And so I can get back up relatively easily. It helps that no one else is here to see me embarrass myself. But put yourself down on the floor. Go to the park and sit on the ground under a tree. Well, maybe not yet. Wait till the spring. Go to a bridge and sit on the bridge and dangle your feet over and let your feet feel free and feel nothing below them. And feel like, what does that feel like? What is it, God? How is God meeting you where you are? Because whether I stand up in front of a congregation on Sunday, or I sit down on the step of the nave, on the chancel step, with kids to talk about God stuff with kids, or just here by myself, it's a completely different perspective. And looking at God and thinking about Jesus from a different perspective helps me to think differently. Doreen taught me how to think differently. And she taught me that even through her funeral, because celebrating her life as we celebrate the life that Jesus gives us in the Eucharist was perfect. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. And it gave me a completely new perspective of what liturgy is for and what church services can do and how healing they can be. Being here, sitting on the floor, looking around, feeling the presence of 100 years of souls praying, 100 years of children laughing at church picnic games on the lawn, arguments and forgiveness. There's something about a church. There's something about sitting down, just being present. But the truth is, it doesn't have to be a church, because all those things happen wherever we are. The Legion, the Elks Hall, the Royal Purple Hall, the Ag Hall, the donut shop, the restaurant, living room, bedroom, hospital room, chapel. All of these are places where if we slow down and sit down and allow ourselves to take a new look, to see things from a different perspective, we can appreciate the incredible gift that God has given us in the people that we have known, the people who have touched our lives, the people whose lives we have touched. So I'm probably going to sit here for a few more minutes and just pray and think about Doreen and think about the folks in Edgerton and Wainwright and the other people I'm going to meet in the next year or so that will come into my life as I am priest and they are parishioner. And I'm going to give thanks to God for calling me to sit my butt down. Stop worrying about what everything looks like. Just be present. Get a new perspective. I hope you get to have that chance this week to get a new perspective. But I tell you what, if you're going to sit down someplace, make sure you can get yourself back up or you got somebody you can call to help you. Because I don't want to hear that you got down and couldn't get back up. That would be kind of sad. Have a good week. Enjoy your sitting down. And then enjoy your rising up and going out to serve Christ in all whom you meet. Have a blessed week. I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachael.